Okay, great. Thank you very much, Beatrice, one more time. And now we're moving on to our final speaker of the day, Yang Cao. She's a PhD student here at HEC, and she focuses on syntactic processing in bilinguals. So she will give a talk entitled Sensitivity to Misusing Verb Inflections in both finite and non-finite clauses in native and non-native Russian, a self-paced reading investigation. Yang, please, when you're ready, please turn on your
Yeah, thank you,
presentation.
Misha. I'm ready.
Sure.
Hi, guys. This is Yang. I'm also from our CCCP group, and I'm a PhD student. This is my second year. And today I want to share with you some interesting thing about my study in processing verb of verb morphology among Chinese-speaking learners of Russian. Interestingly, just now I saw some Chinese names in the audience list, but now they left for some reason. But anyway, let's start. And sorry. Oh, okay, that's better. Let's start from the background. Chinese as a logographic language, it lacks inflections for verbs. Actually, not only for verbs, for everything. And you may have also noticed that when Chinese learners of Russian or English or any language with highly inflections, they always produce many mistakes in terms of morphologies. But why is that? There are some different opinions about this. And for representational deficit accounts, they argue that this rather non-native performance is due to the lacking of verb inflections in Chinese, or let's say it more specific, to the missing of tense feature in L2 speakers interlanguage. And also they argue that for post-puberty second language learners, the new learners in second language that are absent in their L1 language are no more acquirable. So it means that if you don't have tense feature in your first language and you already a late learner, it's never possible for you to really acquire these features. But there are some opposite opinions, such as missing surface inflection hypothesis. They argue that this non-native performance is due to the mapping difficulties from the feature to specific inflected form on the surface. It means that they may have already acquired these features, but for them, it's hard to realize those forms correctly, grammatically, and consistently on the surface. And this kind of mapping difficulty can be caused by many reasons, such as communication pressure. It's understandable, like when people feeling nervous, they make more mistakes, especially for L2 learners. However, most of the related studies are focused on English as the target language. However, we are in Russia, we are in Moscow, and also as a highly inflected language, Russian may make the story more interesting. And also most of the previous studies investigated and also reported non-native performance of learners in a finite condition, such as yesterday I watched this movie. We have yesterday means something happened in the past, so we need to use watched, the past verb morphology. However, maybe we didn't see related study yet investigating non-finite condition. So maybe they will perform a little bit differently from the finite condition in non-finite condition. Example is like yesterday, he suggested me to watch this movie. Like we use to watch here, that's the infinitives. And the reason why it may be different is that infinitives maybe that's the default form, that's the very basic form, maybe it's as easier for the learners to produce. And another reason is that there are some researchers, they argue that in Chinese language, there actually exists a finite and non-finite distinction, even though on the surface, they don't look different. But they think that in their mind, in Chinese people's mind, they can actually tell the difference between finite and non-finite. So the research question of my study is that are Chinese learners of Russian sensitive to misuse of verb morphologies when processing sentences online? So we used a self-based reading task rather than oral production task. We want to give them less pressure in communicating. We want to get access to their real competence. And also, does their Russian proficiency affect such sensitivity? Maybe advanced learners can show such sensitivity, but lower participants cannot. And also, are there any differences between the processing patterns of sentences of finite and non-finite conditions? We expect to see something different. Methodology. The experiment was divided into 3 parts. The first part is the self-based reading task. We used this because compared with oral production task, less pressure, as the missing surface inflection hypothesis argued that Chinese people produce verbs with a large variety of morphologies due to mapping difficulties caused by communicating pressure. So we adopted this task to give them less pressure. And online method allows us to access to their to these L2 learners' competence. And due to coronavirus, this experiment was done online, and I used this tool that is a website-based tool, PC Apex. It is not, I won't say that it's perfect, but in this period of time, it's not a bad choice. And then second part is that we gave those Chinese participants Russian proficiency test with a language background questionnaire. The last part of this experiment is a sentence completion task, is an offline task. And the offline task was adopted to check out their explicit knowledge of Russian inflections. We want to know, do they really learned related grammar in classroom? And here is what we did in self-based reading task. They need to press the space bar to read the whole sentence word by word, and each pressing time will be recorded as RT, and we will use them to do analysis. And there are some examples. There are 4 conditions in self-based reading task. For finite and for non-finite, there are grammatical and ungrammatical. Sentences are in Russian, and I put translation there. For example, in finite conditions, just now, father was silent and his son continued the speech. And if it's ungrammatical, we just put the infinitive there, like to continue in English. For a non-finite condition, we created sentence like just now, father persuaded his clever son to continue the speech. This is grammatical, and ungrammatical is continued. We put inflected verbs here. And there are 36 groups of such sentences, which 4 conditions are, then the period of interest, that's the verb with either correct or incorrect morphology, is controlled to show up at the 8th position of the sentence. So we can see here the verb with grammatical or ungrammatical morphologies always showed up in this position. It's easier for us to do analysis. And after reading each sentence, there is a comprehension question to make sure that participants are really reading the stimuli. And then for the sentence completion task, we have 24 pairs of sentences with 2 conditions, finite and non-finite. What participants needed to do is just to complete the sentences in whatever way they want, with whatever words they want. Example, like, just having heard the bad news, the father was silent and son. We want them to write like did something. So that's the finite condition. We want to see inflected verbs. Non-finite condition, like just having heard the bad news, the father persuaded his son to do something. We want to see infinitives. Participants, we found for self-based reading task 100 Chinese participants. And I'm satisfied with this number. However, when I gave them proficiency test, only 94 of them finished this test. And then I gave them the third part, that's the sentence completion task, and only 88 out of 100 completed or the whole experiment. But I'm really appreciate that, because I know that these experiments rather time consuming. And when we're checking their language background questionnaire, we found 2 of them need to be ruled out, because one said that he started learning Russian when he was 3. This is not what we want. We want late second language learner. And another one reported that his mother's native language is Russian. So we ruled out those 2 participants. So there are, in the end, 86 Chinese participants. For L1 Russian group as the contrast group, we found 100 participants for self-paced reading task and another 76 participants for the third part of the experiment, that's the sentence completion task. All the experiments or the questionnaires and the experiment was conducted online. And some hypotheses for self-paced reading task. Of course, we want to see for the native speakers that they spend longer time processing misused verbs with wrong ungrammatical morphology. We expect to see longer RT when they spending time reading these words. For L1 Chinese group, of course, we want to see something different between finite and non-finite conditions. But if they tend to spend longer time processing the misused verbs, just like the native Russian speakers did. We call it sensitive. And if they didn't show anything difference between the processing time of misused verbs and those correct verbs. It means that they are insensitive to those mistakes. It means that the morphology of verbs actually doesn't bother them when they're processing information of the sentence. For sentence completion task, the hypothesis for native Russian speakers, we expect them to complete the sentence with very grammatically inflected verbs, and we want to see verbs rather than non-verbs, but non-verbs are accepted. We just mark them as noun-verb, and it is not considered as incorrect. Typo is allowed, but we mark them as error, is incorrect. For L1 Chinese group, because sentence completion task is an offline task, so it allows the participants to record their explicit knowledge that they have been told many times in classroom. So therefore, we also expect to see some correctly inflected verbs or infinitives. Maybe not in all the cases, but sometimes, or at least it should be correlated to their Russian proficiency. For those advanced participants, maybe they have better knowledge, better grammar, they know more vocabulary, and they wrote better in this task. And for those participants with lower proficiency, they know less about grammar or know grammar not so well. So it's reasonable if they can't write always correctly in this task. And I want to share with you next some preliminary results. First, in self-paced reading task. Why is preliminary? Because we haven't really started to do the real analysis. And this is the very beginning. And we haven't seen any significance yet because we haven't started yet. And at the beginning, I want to tell you that for the period of interest, I've marked it as P2. That's the verb that we are interested. And the verb, the word in front of P2, we mark it as P1, and then P0. Words that are following the verb that we are interested is marked as P3, P4, and P5. And then we calculated the log 10 RT of their log 10 RT, and then did some analysis. And we actually didn't do streaming. I just removed those incorrectly answered stimuli, because as I said just now, all of the sentences are followed by a comprehension question. And if they answer the question wrongly, so it means that maybe they didn't read the sentence carefully, we rule out those sentences. And what we can see here is that for finite condition, the black one is ungrammatical. They kind of spend longer time reading P3. And in the grammatical condition that they didn't seem to be bothered by the verb. So here they spend longer time, and maybe this is what we expected to see. For non-finite conditions, and we see that ungrammatical sentences, they also tend to spend longer time in P2 and P3, and then and then it means that it bothered them when processing ungrammatical verbs. We don't know, we're not sure about significance yet, but from this chart, maybe we can see that they expect that their performance may be not too far away from our expectation. So that's good. And for L1 Chinese participants, it is interesting because we don't seem to see any delay in any longer RT in P2 or P3, because the time is, let's see, for finite conditions, the black line and the orange line, the direction seem to go exactly the same. And for non-finite conditions, grammar and grammatical and ungrammatical, they also have similar traits. So maybe we can say that generally, overall, that those misused verb morphologies didn't bother them when they processed the verbs, the sentences. And let's have a look at the correlation between the performance of a self-based reading task, that's the accuracy rate in answering the comprehension questions, and with their proficiency score. We can see a significant correlation. I'm happy about this, but it's actually not unexpected, because if they know better in Russian, and of course they read sentences more better, and they answer the questions more correctly than the others. And then the preliminary results about sentence completion task. First, let's have a look at the L1 Russian group. This is the table, this is the chart for finite conditions. Examples are here. In this condition, we expect to see inflected verbs. We expect them to write down the inflected verbs, so that's what we expected to see. A very large amount of inflected verbs were used. Non-verb, they also turn to use non-verbs, but the rate is not so high. And this is the non-finite condition. Also, they put a really large percentage of infinitives here. This is what we expected to see. And here, I think there's only one or two answers like inflected verbs. I think they are typo. They didn't read the sentence carefully. For one Chinese group, we can see something different, that the answers are very colorful, huge variety we can see. But it's actually also out of our expectation, because actually those participants did not bad job in this task. They put 73% inflective verbs here, and only 8% of infinitives in this condition. So actually, it's not bad. And also, we are happy because they show a real difference between the L1 Chinese and L1 Russian group. This is the non-finite condition, and also 72% of the infinitives were written to finish the sentences. And interestingly, what I want to share with you is that they used a high percentage of imperatives here. That's very, very interesting. In this condition, I understand it like maybe those participants, they think they understand verbs like ask or persuade or allow or require, this kind of kind of verbs like a kind of order, so they turn to use imperatives. But if so, then we can't answer why in finite condition there's also a not low percentage of imperatives. Maybe because imperatives they encounter more frequently in life, or imperatives are easier to remember, or is more common compared with other inflected verbs. And then I calculated the score in sentence completion task. There are 24 sentences in total, and answers are considered as accurate if the participants reject in finite condition, reject the infinitives and select inflected verbs, both present and past. And also it's considered as accurate as correct in non-finite condition if the participants rejected inflected verbs and selected infinitives. So it means that even though we misspelling was ruled out, but gender and person disagreement was kept because our interest is finite or non-finite. So if they made a correct decision between finite and non-finite, we considered them as accurate, as correct. And then correlation between performance of sentence completion task, the score they got just now I showed you this one, I calculated, and with their proficiency score. And also we see a significant correlation. Yep. And actually, I really like this proficiency test. And I think we saw a correlation between these two tasks and between the self-based reading task accuracy rate, between this accuracy rate and the proficiency score is because this proficiency test is really good. So I also appreciate that. Our next step is to consider how to deal with the data of self-based reading task, and outliers, how to stream the data, how to calculate residuals, which test to use, ANOVA or linear mixed effects, effects model, and also from the general pattern of L1 Chinese performance I've just shown. It seems that they are not sensitive to the misuse of verb morphologies at all. However, in the following analysis, we hope to see some differences among participants with higher level of Russian proficiency. So that's all that's the end of my presentation. Thank you so much for listening, and I'm ready for questions.
Thank you, Yang, very much. We have a question from Zahar. She says, very interesting. So the L2 learners actually did better in the production task than in the reading task.
Sorry, let me have a look again. L2 learners actually did better. I would say that because this task is that they just need to write down, they need to finish the sentence, so they have time to record, to use the knowledge, to use their express knowledge. So actually, it's not a surprise if they did better in this task than the online task. That's the self-based reading task. So I think it's understandable.
Another question from Marina. Could you kindly remind us what the L2's level of L2 proficiency was?
Remind us what the L2 learners' level of proficiency was. And let me have a look at the table. And the the proficiency full score is, I remember, it's 58. So actually we can see their proficiency. Well, we have participants with low proficiency, with very low score in this test, and with some really high score. So actually we have both. We have all of them, like not only good learners of Russian. We have lower and also maybe intermediate and also advanced.
Thank you very much. Any more questions? Okay, there is another one from Tanya. This is probably not the question, but it's more a suggestion. Our fresh new paper might help you as we employed a visual moving paradigm as well, and she sends the link to the paper. We included proficiency as a continuous predictor.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, this might be my next step. I want to use their proficiency score as a continuous predictor as well. Thank you so much. I'll have a look.
Also, another question from Martina. She would like to get a clarification. Do you have an explanation for the different reaction times in the Chinese group for finite and non-finite sentences and the SPR, in the SPR?
Yes, of course. Because let's have a look at this example here. Sorry, I forgot to put English translation here. But I think the problem that the reason why they read faster in finite condition than non-finite condition is that in finite condition we can see that the word is rather is relatively shorter than the one in non-finite condition, and also let's translate them like father persuaded his smart son. In English, we don't need to change the form of object, but in Russian, we need to use accusative forms for those his clever son. So I think this also make their processing harder than those. Here we have and his son. So actually, they are subject. The base form didn't change. The form didn't change. So I think because the inflections also gave them a burden in processing.
So you're basically trying to say that in two of those conditions, they show facilitation due to sensitivity to prediction cues present in the preceding part of the sentence, and that's not happening. When that's not happening, it takes them longer because they don't carry that. Okay.
Yeah, it didn't bother them. And also when I'm running this experiment, many Russian participants came to me say, I found lots of mistakes in your experiment. If you need any proofreading, I can help. But no Chinese participants demanded that at all.
It's very good to know that you have proofreading available to you from your Chinese participants.
Yeah, they're so kind.
Okay, guys, if you don't mind, let's wrap up this. I think it was a spectacular first day. Very interesting, very well attended. And I'm really, really grateful to all those of you who stayed through the second half as well. And I can only emphasize once again that it's extremely beneficial to our young research fellows and our PhD students to be able to tap into this expertise, right, of our invited speakers and the wider audience, and questions are all absolutely to the point and very informative. I've had a couple of private messages through the chat with ideas of new experiments following the talks and following the question sessions. So me personally, and I think I can say it on behalf of the whole organizing committee, very, very happy for this first day. Hopefully tomorrow will be as smooth and as exciting. Special thanks to Bea Bermudez Margareto for organizing, leading role in organizing this effort, and also to Mikhail Pakhadai for organizing it, doing the technical part of it in such a way that everything works so well. Okay, so on that note, let me say thank you once again, and I'll see you all tomorrow.